On this episode of Audiobook Club, the real history of the Renaissance castle that was home to the Third Reich's most notorious prisoner of war camp, where they imprisoned only the most troublesome Allied military prisoners, many of them serial escapists, all of them enemies of the German state. Welcome to Colditz.
The myth of Colditz has stood unchanged and unchallenged for more than 70 years. Prisoners of war with moustaches firmly set on stiff upper lips, defying the Nazis by tunnelling out of a grim Gothic castle on a German hilltop. Yet, like all legends, that tale contains only a part of the truth. Colditz was a miniature replica of pre-war society, only stranger. It was a close-knit community, intensely divided over issues of class, politics, sexuality, and race. In addition to the resolute warriors, the participants in the Colditz drama included communists, scientists, homosexuals, women, aesthetes and philistines, aristocrats, spies, workers, poets, and traitors. Moreover, roughly half the population of Colditz was German.
Hello, I'm Steve Phillips, and welcome to another episode of Audiobook Club, a podcast about audiobooks that always abides by the rules of the Geneva Convention. On this episode, we're going to be serving hard time with Colditz, prisoners of the castle. Joining me from the other side of the world, in the words of Katie Tunstall, it's Matt Layton in Adelaide, Australia. Hey, Matt.
Hello, Steve. Why did you mention Katie Tunstall?
That song, Other Side of the World, and that's where you are from me.
Because, do you know what? Funnily enough, little name drop, clang. I'm involved in this music festival for International White Cane Day down here. And the second act on the stage will be Katie Tunstall. She has given of her time to support this other thing I'm doing. So it's strange that you should mention her.
Oh, we had something in our water there, didn't we, eh?
Yeah.
Whatever that phrase really means, but yeah, wow, there's something in that. There's something in that. She may pop up on the podcast. Who knows? Of course, she won't do that.
No.
Anyway, I'll drag us back to the. Instantly, we've gone off to Katie Tunstall rather than Colditz, and there's literally no connection there. There's no sort of 6 degrees of separation from Katie Tunstall to Colditz.
No. So we're doing a book about Colditz. How did you feel when confronted with the idea that you were going to have to read a serious book about World War II history?
When you first mentioned it, there's always the feeling of like, okay, how long is it? And you look at the hours, and I was thinking, it's a 13-hour one. I've got to do this in a week. This is not going to happen. And then I started listening to it, and I just realized, oh, actually, no, come on, I love history. I really love a good historical audiobook. Really love things like Andrew Marr's History of Modern Britain. You know, these sort of books,
which I feel I need to read. Absolutely.
Yeah, do it. We should review that one actually. One of the sort of way back in the archive kind of ones. But actually, I found this was so accessible, so sort of. It told me things I had no idea about Colditz. Colditz was just a thing that you watched old war films about and so on, and the impression of how the British could kind of bossed it with their amazing escapes and all this kind of thing. But it was so layered, you know, the real stories of who really escaped. I didn't know things like Airy Neve. You know, Airy Neve, of course, was the politician, the conservative politician who was victim of a IRA bomb attack and he escaped from Colditz. Incredible. Anyway, we'll get into that stuff.
So my feeling was, obviously, we were talking about World War II in school. I mean, at the age of 7, we had a school trip to the Normandy beaches. I can reel off things like the wooded hills of the Ardennes, where the Maginot Line was, Rommel, El Alamein.
The Maginot Line I remember from Dad's Army when Sergeant Wilson walks into Captain Mannering's office and said, "They went round the side, sir." Well, they went around the side. That's a typical shabby Nazi trick.
That is, again, an interesting point in that it is so... We've had it up to the eyeballs. And I also happen to like Germany. And as discussed on last week's show briefly, I lived there. And it's always been quite a difficult relationship with the Second World War. It was omnipresent in my childhood. And it just doesn't necessarily seem to be there as much anymore in the stuff we consume. I mean, Hello and Dad's Army were, in some ways, sort of the nadir of British comedy when we had funny Nazis.
You started early. Funny Nazis, everyone.
The idea of reading a World War II history book, I don't particularly like the type of people who read World War II history books. They tend to be bores. It's also a sort of a statement of middle age. And there's always the thing where you hear people who are enthusiastic about the subject basically trying to out-fact each other and out-rethink the strategy of each other. And I really wasn't up for it. But then, as you say, you start reading this book, which we took as a recommendation from the author of last week's book, who is, of course, Richard Osman. He's a fan of audiobooks and he said he enjoyed these, so we thought we'd give it a go. And I think the reason this is different is because we're not looking at arrows on maps. We're not looking at people pushing the models of fighter bombers around on a table. This book is about people, isn't it?
Yeah, and conditions and circumstance and the hopelessness and how the human condition, actually, you put someone in a circumstance like that where there's no hope of escape and no idea. It's not like one line that really struck me was that these men were in a prison and they had no idea how long they would be in there for. There was no parole. There was no, you've been given this sentence. It's just, when liberation happens, or worse, if it didn't go well.
Shall we take a step back, do our usual process of talking about the author, the topics, the subject matter of the book, and then the narration?
Thank you, Matthew, for launching the process.
All right, so Ben MacIntyre, an author I hadn't really encountered before. He is an author and he writes for the Times newspaper, the Times of London. And apparently he's a second-generation historian. So his dad was master of Magdalen College, Oxford, and he's a second-generation Oxbridge historian. This book is about Colditz, and Colditz originally is a town, and then the castle on the hill, built many hundreds of years ago. Initially, the book goes into the history of it. It was owned by a man called Augustus the Strong at one point, who had many wives, many children, and indulged in the sport of fox tossing.
I really wasn't expecting that line to come up.
Okay, we're laughing at the Second World War, Steve. But yes, insert gap for Steve.
Fox tossing. Well, I shouldn't be laughing at fox tossing either. That's horrible.
No.
That's horrible.
Well, yes, at least they're not milking them.
Oh.
The Third Reich...
I'm still getting over. I'm still in rehab over that one.
In the Second World War, Colditz becomes the entity that we know, the myth, the legend of the prisoner of war camp. I think it's important at this point to go, obviously, when you say camp, Germany, World War II, there is an instinct to go towards a concentration camp. This isn't that. It's a prisoner of war camp where captured soldiers are sent. And to be honest, the conditions initially certainly aren't as bad as you might think. So it's a slightly subtler entity than a concentration camp, if that's a fair way of putting it. As mentioned in the introduction, the films that you and I grew up watching on BBC Two in black and white on a Saturday afternoon, or indeed at Christmas, would always have British airmen who'd been shot down with handlebar moustaches, having a secret committee and digging their way out, or moving the bed, digging a tunnel to get out of the camp, and escaping and trying to fool the German guards. Of course, you can't really tunnel your way out of a castle on top of a mountain, so it wasn't like that. And this book sets out to, as you heard in the clip at the beginning, to perhaps sort of bump that myth down a level or two. There are lots of stories of escape and remarkable daring do in this book, but it reminds us that there were Polish, Dutch, French, Jewish French, Yugoslavian, even Indian prisoners in the camp itself. So it's quite diverse. But the key to this book is that it focuses on individuals involved. And in fact, the first human being who is described to us is actually one of the prison guard sergeants. And he is a distinctive figure with handlebar moustaches and a very strict way about him. But then one of the British prisoners disguises himself as it, and we get this wonderful description of a British prisoner wearing a fake uniform and a ginger moustache made of the bristles of a shaving brush.
Every evening, Sergeant Major Gustav Rothenberger carried out an inspection of the castle perimeter, checking the sentries were alert at their posts and hoping to catch one napping. Shortly before midnight, on a warm September night in 1943, the Sergeant Major appeared on the terrace as usual, accompanied by two soldiers with slung rifles. Rothenberger cut an unmistakable figure, battle-scarred, disciplined, and extravagantly hairy. The most distinctive thing about Rothenberger was his facial plumage, a spectacular moustache and mutton chop combination. The old soldier was immensely proud of his huge gingery whiskers. The British POWs called him Franz Josef, after the Austro-Hungarian emperor with the handlebar moustaches, but never, ever to his face. Rothenberger marched up smartly to the first guard on the terrace and barked, "There is an attempted escape on the west side. Report to the guardhouse immediately." The startled sentry saluted, clicked his heels, and took off. The officer dismissed the second guard, and then the third. "You're relieved early," snapped the mustachioed sergeant major. "Give me the key." Rothenberger appeared to be particularly irritable tonight, but appearances can be deceptive. A close inspection of Rothenberger's facial hair would have revealed that it was made from dismantled shaving brushes, coloured ginger grey with watercolour paints from the prison shop, and attached with glue. His uniform, like those of his escorts, was stitched with precision out of prison blankets and dyed the correct shade of German field grey. The iron cross on his breast was made from zinc, stripped off the castle roof and moulded into shape with a hot kitchen knife. His headgear had been fashioned out of a peaked RAF cap using felt and string. His pistol holder was cardboard, shined up with brown boot polish, from which poked a piece of wood painted to look like the butt of a 9mm Walter P38 pistol. The two soldiers in greatcoats carried dummy rifles with wooden barrels polished with pencil lead, bolts fashioned from bits of steel bedstead, and tin triggers formed from metal cutlery. The sergeant major was a replica Rothenberger. His name was Michael Sinclair, a 25-year-old British lieutenant who had already escaped twice from Colditz before being caught and brought back.
I don't know if you enjoyed that moment, Steve.
I did. Are we talking about, is this Michael Sinclair, is it? We're talking about here.
I think it was Sinclair, wasn't it?
Sinclair.
In the opening chapter, but the whole idea, it was quite cinematic.
Yeah.
The way we met the characters. This wasn't, and then the generals moved their troops to this place there. It was a human being with sweat on his forehead in a ridiculous disguise, hoping to get away with something. And that's how you get thrown into this book. And I think it's great. And yeah, Michael Sinclair is the obsessive serial escape artist. And history spoilers, don't know. Well, you read the book and find out about him. There are other British officers. There's the head of the escape committee, a guy called Pat Reed.
Yeah, Pat Reed. Pat Reed. You talk about the cinematic introduction to these characters. Pat Reed. He just seemed like such a sort of a heroic kind of figure who didn't really care what he did, went to any lengths to kind of escape. Well, they're all real characters, aren't they?
So the interesting one for me was the first name I recognised and went, oh, okay, I should pay attention here, was actually Douglas Bader.
Yeah.
Who, it's a name you vaguely know as a hero. I think in this book, Ben MacIntyre tries to, again, tear down the myth of him slightly. So he was a double amputee. He lost both of his legs, but he lost both of it, which sounds heroic. He lost both of his legs mucking about in an aeroplane. And yeah, it turns out he's quite an objectionable person.
He's horrible.
Yeah, absolutely horrible.
He's horrible in this.
So this guy who was held up as the Captain America of the United Kingdom turned out to be horrible. They also, so it was a camp for officers. Some of the officers are allowed to bring their orderlies with them. And Douglas Bader, horrible man, his orderly, Alex Ross, gets permission to go home. And Bader says, no, you're not going. And the guy has to stay another 2 years in the camp, because even though he'd been given permission to leave, because the senior officer in his chain of command has said, you're not going anywhere, mate.
We should probably deepen Alex Ross's story here, because what Alex Ross had to do for Douglas Bader while the pair of them were in Colditz, every morning and every evening, Alex Ross had to carry Douglas Bader up and down the stairs for his morning and evening baths. And he had to do it for another 2 years, all because, and I quote from the book, roughly quote from the book, because I can't remember the exact line. It's like, now look here, Ross, you're my lackey, and your buddy will stay here until we get liberated, until I get out of here.
Yeah.
And he said, well, you don't say. He said he couldn't say anything to it. He was just crestfallen. He didn't complain. It wasn't a done thing to do that. You just go, oh well, that's that then. So British.
Yeah, it is so British. It reminds me of a young you and me.
Yes. Now look here, Phillips, you're my lackey.
You're my bet man. You're my bet man.
You're jolly well record podcasts until someone listens to it, and we're still waiting. Obviously,
still waiting. You're going to be here until it happens. So the other thing
I shouldn't have to carry you up and downstairs to your bath, though, Matt. To be fair, both of your legs are working.
Privilege of rank.
Yes, indeed.
Initially in the camp, being a prisoner of war is obviously a horrible thing to be, but it does seem as though the conditions initially aren't that terrible. One of the other myths that this book seeks to dispel is the notion that every single prisoner was trying to escape, and a lot of them weren't. They didn't feel the obligation we all see that everybody in the films has, is that as a British officer, you must try to escape. They're actually quite honourable in not trying to escape at certain points, and there were certain people who went, there's one in particular went, oh no, I've got an artistic temperament. I won't be climbing over barbed wire in the dead of the night, dodging bullets.
I don't like that sort of thing, in the words of Private Godfrey.
So you see, you can't help it, can you? There is like a pantheon of, that's a Dad's Army reference, a sitcom about the Second World War. There is, in British culture, and for people of our age, anytime you mention the Second World War, there are a series of images and thoughts that flash through our heads. And one of them is people tunneling out. But as I say, you can't really tunnel out of a building that's on top of a piece of rock, because you just, yeah. At the beginning, they're getting Red Cross packages. They're greeted by some Polish prisoners, I think, who give them beer, and there seems to be a certain amount of distilling of alcohol going on. It's interesting to, as you say, from what used to be a thing on the map and, the images of films of people moving beds and digging with spoons and getting rid of the spoil by walking around the exercise yard and releasing little bags in their trousers to let the sand out. This is what we think of when we think of Colditz, I think, isn't it, Steve?
It is.
To get the idea that they're all there, and actually the prisoners aren't the only people who were stuck there for an indefinite amount of time against their will.
No.
The guards don't particularly want to be there as well. And just imagining being in one place for 4 years.
Are you feeling sorry for the Nazis after your line about the funny Nazis? All Nazis had to... Yeah, that's true. That is true. It is true. It's a good point. It's
good. My pendulum feelings on Nazis. Yes. No. But again, you find yourself... really brought home to me just how long 4 years is and all of the things that would happen. And as the book progresses, the conditions for the prisoners get worse until ultimately they're in danger. And again, this is a couple of days at the end of 4 years of being imprisoned in a castle. They basically become a political football between the SS, who want to kill them, the guards at the prisoner of war camp who are in fear for their own lives, and then the Americans and the Russians are coming over the hill, driving tanks and firing weapons at the castle. So, yeah, just the whole jolly hockey sticks, tunneling your way out thing, it certainly revealed a lot more depth to me. And I enjoyed every moment of it, I think, Steve.
You touched on the tunnelling quite a lot here, and this is interesting, yes, there was a lot of the tunnelling going on. And what was incredibly heartrending, and actually was narrated quite matter-of-factly, or written quite matter-of-factly by Ben MacIntyre, was I think it was the French tunnellers. So the French were digging a tunnel, and it looks like there was a cross purposes. I think the Polish were digging a tunnel, or the French were digging a tunnel that was quite close to some pretty crucial infrastructure of the building, to the point where they felt some dust, or there was a hole or something like that. And basically Eggers, the German who we'll come on to, I guess, Eggers, discovered this tunnel purely because, well, there was something quite flimsy. There was basically a hole in the floor, and they chucked a couple of rocks down. There was like a hollow bounce. It was like, hello, what's this? And then they winched down a poor like German like kid, basically, to see if it was anyone down there. And there were three French tunnellers digging it. And the killer line at the end of that it was about the day before the actual breakout. 256 days of tunnelling had gone to nothing. 256 days is just it's so hard. All this planning and all this effort into each escape, not just the tunnel, because the tunnelling didn't seem to work all that well, did it? From memory, I think there were all sorts of other escapes that did.
Yeah, I think the tunnel. I mean, they built a glider at one point, but yeah, Eggers is a very important character. I was reading down my list of the human beings who are brought to life in this book. Just before I get to Eggers, I've got the first person to escape was a French aristocrat in a monocle who's an Olympic show jumper, and he basically strolled out in a suit made out of a flannel dressing gown that had been sent from Paris.
So French.
Then there was the only brown man in the village, the as they put it, the Indian Irendra
Mazunda. Yeah, Mazunda, yeah.
And he... I just felt guilty and terrible as an English person for the way that he'd been treated. You know, the English,
awful.
Yeah,
awful.
But yeah, Eggers is this book is very well researched. It brings to life a lot of material that you can feel that the author has been through, that Ben MacIntyre has been through. But one of the sources of that material is the diary of the man who is initially sort of deputy head of security of the camp and ultimately head of security. He seems to be there for the whole 4 or 5 years. He is a 49-year-old German patriot, Anglophile, and definitely not a Nazi. But I think it's his diaries. There's always some sort of, you can feel the presence of his diaries running through it. There's almost a bit where if Ben MacIntyre wants to check a fact, behind the scenes you can hear him leafing through Eggers's diary. For me, this is really interesting. So when I was a teacher in Germany, and it just brings it closer to me.
You were a teacher in Germany?
When I was a teacher in Germany, one of my students who was 19 years at the time, she was called Sandra Eggers. So I know an Eggers. So it makes it, it humanized Eggers for me even more.
That's really interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. And I was doing the same journey as you, trying to sort of put these kind of characters around. And Eggers seemed very affable. It was like there seemed to be. He seemed the way it happened. All these escape attempts, the amount of equipment, the amount of clothing, the amount of material they needed. It just felt like each of these cells was just basically tooled up to the nines, and the Germans couldn't find all this stuff. All these, like the glider. How do you hide a glider? How do you? I mean, and there is actually a documentary about trying to recreate the glider launch off the roof, and the way they have it, there's this wooden structure sitting, prouder than anything, like Elisha Beacon, on top of this roof. This wooden, it's like you could see it from the village. How did no one see that? You know. So I couldn't quite get the amount of things involved. How they came. I know that they came by stuff through. There's a period when they realised they could start communicating with London through code, through coded letters and things, and also they had materials from Red Cross parcels and such and so forth. But I couldn't quite understand how these elaborate escape attempts, which were quite resource intensive, needing a lot of stuff. Where did they put that stuff, hide that stuff? How, all that soil from the tunneling?
The answer where they hid their equipment was in little aluminium tubes that wrapped cigars. They would put maps and money in those and then ran them up their backside, Steve. That's actually the answer to that question.
That's what I do on my morning commute, frankly. Keep it safe.
The ingenious nature of all of the invisible inks and they didn't actually send anything in the Red Cross packages because they didn't want to jeopardize the Red Cross supplies.
Of course, yeah.
See, I've genuinely listened to this one and genuinely engaged in it, genuinely been fascinated. I've genuinely learnt stuff.
Yeah.
And as I say, to go back to what I said to initially, sometimes the people who are interested in World War II history turn me off the subject, but this book has certainly turned me onto it. Can I quickly do the narration and the performance?
Of course.
Or narration / performance. Ben MacIntyre, the author, reads the book. As I've said many times on this show, it's not always necessarily a good thing. Sometimes the publisher says to an author, we've hired a studio so you can read your audiobook, and you get 13 hours of the most turgid reading ever. The author will tweet on the first day and go, my publishing company has hired me a studio so I can record my audiobook. And then day 3, you don't hear anything more from them, and it's becomes a grind. This book is very well read. Ben MacIntyre feels like a history presenter off the telly. Well, indeed, he has made documentaries. He's what a history buff should sound like. And that's good because he's second generation. The book is narrated competently, and I'm incredibly grateful that the author took the time to do it and put all that hard work in. And this definitely is a case where the author reading the book, I will be disappointed if the next one I read, he hasn't narrated it. Is that fair?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he was an excellent narrator, I thought. And actually it was a classic case of it was like an autobiography, to be honest, because an autobiography has to be read by the person who it's about, in my view. And this felt very much like this had a lot of research, a lot of passion, and a lot of care as well, sensitivity in the writing, in the words, that actually it felt only he could, as long as he's a good narrator, as long as he's a good storyteller, good voice, good performance. And he ticks all those boxes, really. And the advantage is he can put the emphasis where he believes everything was, because he wrote those words. And yeah, I thought he was an excellent narrator.
The last sentence of the preface of the book, I'm glad we've established that. Now, the last sentence of the preface of the book, which I only got the second time I read it, is, what would you have done? How would you have been in Colditz, Steve?
Oh, geez. I mean, it's you can't imagine what war does to you anyway. So, you would have had to be a fighter pilot or whatever. You've been shot down in enemy territory. So you've done some pretty brave things. I mean, imagine being ejected from a fighter plane in midair now. You know what I mean? In our woke elite lives or whatever. You can't imagine. You can't imagine when you're, we think of Uncle Albert and Only Fools and Horses and, during the war and all this sort of thing. And I remember listening to my granddad telling his war stories, and you can't fathom it. You can't fathom what it must be like to be in a war. And so suddenly it will change you. It will change what you're like. I can't tell you what I would be like. I hope I'd like to think I'd be braver. And that would actually you'd think you'd be in Colditz and think, actually, no, even just to break the monotony, because none of them got shot for trying to escape, did they, really?
Initially, no. So again, there are, the statistics are interesting. There was a gentlemanly agreement to do it. Can I ask the question as well?
Yes, of course.
I only thought of the correct answer while you were talking about it. And some of the things that you said, I want to go back to. You said you remember your granddad telling the war stories. I remember when I went to Germany, my father's family are Jewish. And I told my Auntie Pam, who was the oldest season ticket holder at Arsenal at the time, I said to her, she said, "Oh, you can't go with those Germans," because it was very real to her.
Yeah.
And I said, well, that was 50 years ago, Auntie Pam. We have to reconciliate with them now. And she said to me, well, you might have to, but I don't.
Yeah.
That kind of reaction to the Second World War was very tangible. I mentioned the artist earlier on, who had no desire to escape and thought he'd just keep his head down. I think I would possibly have been like that. And then I realised that, as you were talking, that basically what you do with your useless son, you send your first one, the first one is the heir, the second one you send to the military, and the third son, basically the useless third son, goes to the clergy. I think if I were to be in Colditz, it's because I would have been not fit to get into the army conventionally, and would have been trained as a priest. So
I can't see you crawling through the tunnel in
my vestments.
Your outfit. Your vestments, yeah.
No, so I can't imagine how I would end up there. But if I did, then it would probably be for some weird reason like that.
Dude, we have to face facts. Do you know what would have happened? If you and I were in Colditz, we would have been orderlies who aren't allowed to be involved in any escaping at all. We just have to go and lug our blooming masters around up and downstairs for their morning, tongue waxing or whatever.
I think you're absolutely right. Okay. So that's the question that the book is asked within the book. Then I have a surprising thing that I think is important that I want to tell you about. Thus far, me being in Australia for the purposes of Audiobookclub has been a pain in the bum more than anything else. It's time zones, it's different, it's distance, it's or dealing with the fact that the audio never quite marries up and we've got to edit it. But yesterday afternoon, I changed the opening script to this show. What it originally said is, on this episode of Audiobookclub, the real history of Colditz. And then I spoke to a couple of people, one of whom was Shane.
Friend of the show. Yeah.
And my friend Rita, who I was having a coffee with, and at separate times, I just said to them, so what do you think of when I say Colditz? And they went,
Really?
Yeah, so people living lives not dissimilar to ours in a country where the Queen is the head of state didn't have the immediate association that we have with the, when we say Colditz, we've mentioned them over and over again, but there's an immediate stream of images and thoughts, and indeed, as this book puts it, myth that comes through. It flashes past your eyes. The whole, digging with spoons, handlebar moustache thing, it flashes past nothing. So culturally, outside the UK, it's not necessarily something that is well known.
No,
which is very interesting. So there were actually 1,000 prisoners there. And my point of reference there is, well, that's about the size of a secondary school. And all of these escape, attempts and that have fueled many films. The Colditz television series where I think Pat Reed had written the script or was a consultant. The Colditz board game, the comedy Nazis that came because the war films were so prevalent when we were growing up. The World War II feels quite close for us, Steve, because as you say, we spoke to people who were there, but the last prisoner from Colditz, survivor, died in 2013. I will fully acknowledge that I went into this going, oh God, I've done enough German history and bloody history of World War II. World War II people are bores. But over the 13 hours I spent with the book, I have to say I was reminded that it's important to remember these things.
Yeah, completely. I mean, it's the situation, isn't it? It's the circumstance. This wholly unique situation, this wholly unique place is a story for the ages, really. And I understand Shane and Rita's reaction, natives to Australia, that if you'd asked them about Gallipoli or Anzacs, they would tell you more. But
Absolutely.
to us, it's there weren't to my knowledge any Australians at Colditz or New Zealanders. It was English. It was European largely, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah, but it's what we assume we know, Steve. It's something I've learned with this. As I say, the intro is slightly longer because I realised that what you and I, being our age and being from where we're from, we instantly have an association, but not everybody does have this association, and I think it's important that it continues. I don't know. I haven't spoken to a 13-year-old from the UK right now. I don't know if they watched war films on a Saturday afternoon. I don't know if they saw adverts on the telly for Colditz the board game, which for a while, according to the book, outsold Monopoly. Those things.
Yes, I remember this. I remember that.
Yeah, you and I have those references, but I'm not sure people do anymore. And I think the important thing that this book does is make that history, those stories, accessible for somebody like me who perhaps didn't think he wanted to read a World War II book. And I would encourage anybody to do so.
Oh, completely. If you're going to read, I mean, honestly, I just talking about it anecdotally to people saying that this is the book we're doing this week, they were going, "Oh yeah, I've read that." So many people, people you wouldn't expect to have read it, have read this book.
It only came out on the 15th of September. They're probably lying to you, Steve.
Oh, well, maybe the audio book, maybe the written book was out a little bit before that, hopefully.
But not that you're surrounded by liars.
Not the other book called Colditz, I guess it has been written about by other people, of course, down there.
But isn't that the thing? It's like, yeah, I've read the book on Colditz. Yeah, this isn't, interestingly, we all assume we have read it, but this isn't that. This is brilliant.
Just to your point about remembering it, we need to remember this. During the course of the last week, since last week's broadcast or podcast, not broadcast, of course, was I started getting very interested in the characters and the whole situation. I needed to see Colditz. I needed to start seeing it on a screen or to picture and visualize it, because it was kind of the imagination of the mind. And actually, I didn't need the imagination of the mind. I wanted to see it. So if you just YouTube Colditz, just search on YouTube, there's some people have uploaded old documentaries. There's a Channel 4 one from about 25 years ago, where you're guided around Colditz by some of the people, and they make reference to Pat Reed and to Ari Neve and to Guy German and so on. They show photos of them as well, and they show you what their rooms looked like, and they could pinpoint them exactly, going back some 50 years later. So just YouTube. I can't remember what the documentary was called, but you'll know it when you see it. And there was also the recreation of the glider as well, where they tried to make it fly, because it never flew, did it? In the end, I think.
No, they got and they reckon it was chopped up and used for firewood in hard times in the German Democratic Republic.
Wow, incredible. Well, have we exhausted Colditz? I mean, you could talk about it for ages, couldn't you? Really, maybe 13 hours or so, can we?
I think we need to look forward.
Let's look forward. In that case, if our listener wants to join in with Audiobook Club Fun and Games, what should we be listening to next week, Matt?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I am very grateful. I received an audiobook as a gift yesterday. I received From the Oast House, the Alan Partridge podcast, Series 2 by Alan Partridge, which, of course, is a nom de plume, as he would say, of British comedian and Hollywood actor Steve Coogan. I'm really frightened of this one, Steve.
I know you are, that's why I sent it to you. I think we should face our fear.
I'm very glad that my daughter's generation have made the word cringe an adjective. Dad, you are totally cringe. I feel like it was almost made for me. But the whole idea of the lead character, who has been around for nearly 30 years now, is that he is a failed, to a certain extent, a failed wannabe local radio presenter, which, frankly, is how I would describe myself. And he is embarrassing. And yes, I feel it's almost a documentary about my life. So I in the same way that I can't watch The Office, I have difficulty with Alan Partridge because it's too much like a biopic. So I am dreading it, and I'm sure it will make an entertaining episode of Audiobook Club.
Definitely. I don't think you'll be disappointed, actually. I think your fears might be allayed. It's less of the radio. And
okay.
But yeah, hearing is believing. It's also about 4 hours long, this one, so it'll be a quick one. Be a quickie, this one.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And I've got something else written down here, but you are excited about The Sandman 3, aren't you? So Neil Gaiman's The Sandman, produced by Audiobook Club, former guest, I don't think he'd describe himself as a friend of our show, Dirk Maggs, the most legendary audiobook producer of all time.
What an amazing guy, though. What a nice man to give up all that time for us to talk to us and go through. Because if you've heard our podcast on Sandman, just around the time Sandman 2 came out, and I'd never heard anything like this. It was an assault on the ears. It was like a movie for the ears. And actually, it's only when I came across an episode of University Challenge where I saw Dirk Maggs actually on there. It was like a celebrity edition. And this was before I said those words. He actually said the same thing during his introduction on University Challenge. And so, yeah, if you haven't heard Sandman, obviously it's been out on Netflix. It's a major success on Netflix. But the audio version of Neil Gaiman's comic is just stunning. Sandman 1 and 2, if you've not done it yet. Sandman 3, as we record, dropped yesterday with a sort of a teasy post from Neil Gaiman. And it's got names all the way through it. James McAvoy, Jeffrey Wright, I think's in there. Miriam Margolyes plays Desire. All really good stuff. Despair, sorry.
And before you do that, you should listen to our interview. In fact, there's a video of it on our website, audiobookclub.net, our interview with Dirk Maggs, the most legendary, the best audio book producer in the world.
Yeah, Totally. And actually, it was a good lesson for us, because a lesson for us to tell our guests that we're going to put it on video before they join as well. Because he was like, "Are we filming this? Are we? Oh, right, okay." He was very nice about it. Okay, right then. So that's Sandman. That's Sandman 3. Is there anything else before we wrap up? It seems like quite a long goodbye, this, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, I think we should have gone 10 minutes ago, but yeah.
Yeah, we should have gone. Okay, that was Colditz, Prisoners of the Castle, narrated and written by Ben MacIntyre. Comes in at 13 hours and 25 minutes. It's the unabridged audiobook. It was released only a few weeks ago on the 15th September and is released by Penguin Audio. That's Audiobook Club for this week. Don't forget, get in touch with us anytime. Recommend something for us as well. We want to go left field. We did No Effects the other week, and that was, well, it changed my life, certainly. So if you've got anything you'd like us to recommend, any audiobook that you've been listening to you absolutely love, just let us know. Its hashtag is Audiobook Club. Our Twitter account is Audiobook Show. Just search for Audiobook Club on Facebook as well. We're on there. Drop us a message and we will listen to what you suggest. In the meantime, we'll see you next week. Cheers, Matt.
Thank you, Steve.